Public sector bodies generally have a lower cost of capital, therefore a lower hurdle rate, and also have more certainty over those factors like owning sites for long periods of time and being able to maintain them. So applying those hurdle rates, so the left bar, left dotted line is the minimum for public sector body and the right-hand one is the maximum. You can see that most electricity projects that qualify for feed-in tariffs do meet public sector hurdle rates. So most of those, or all of those, are on paper viable. For heat, you can see it's more varied because the renewable heat incentives vary more. So biomass CHP at a smaller scale is unlikely to be effective, whereas municipal anaerobic digestion or funding homes to have air source heat pumps with the current incentives would certainly clear your hurdle rates. So where can you get your capital investment from? So you already have your capital reserves, and even after the spending review, you may have some of those left, which you see them as being wisely used to invest in renewable projects. The Public Works Loan Board still exists. The rate has gone up under the spending review by 1%, and banks are now even more keen, now they understand the business models and see the feed-in tariffs and renewable heat incentives in place, are very keen to lend for these types of technologies. Possibly in the future, and this is where some of the future trends come in, we'll see some regional revolving funds set up, working with one company called Finance Southeast, who are looking at setting up a community generation fund for the region, which will invest in the feasibility and capital stages of renewable projects with community enterprises and local authorities. A similar example is the Omni Empower Fund. And of course, now we have the confirmation that the Green Investment Bank will be established next year. How exactly that works at this level and size of projects is unclear, but hopefully it won't all go to offshore wind and combined CCS. So how does the feed-in tariff improve financing? Investors love TLC, transparency, longevity, and certainty. The feed-in tariffs and renewable heat incentives are transparent. Everyone knows what they will be and what they will be in future years. They are long. They'll be in place for 20 to 25 years, depending on what technology you choose. And there's certainty. They will change by inflation and nothing else. As long as you generate the energy, you'll get the feed-in tariffs and renewable heat incentives. The uncertainty was there because of the spending review. So what has it done to the certainty? The review will still take place as scheduled in 2012, but the Chancellor has said that if there is exceptionally high demand on different technologies, it may be reviewed faster. But I can't see any way that the government would ever impose a retrospective change to feed-in tariffs or renewable heat incentives for existing projects, or give very short notice of changes. So, and that's the bottom line for creating that certainty for investment market. So to look at how you can share the returns, costs and risks of projects if you don't feel comfortable taking them on yourselves. You can share with a lender, so by using bank lending and sharing some of the benefits from projects, using a commercial developer. So I was talking just now about leasing your sites off to developers, and with increasingly community energy enterprises, which we'll look at in a second. So less risk and return is to let your sites out. Then you can get option fees before the development actually takes place from a developer to give them a fixed period of time to try and get planning permission, and then a fixed rent after it goes into existence. In a joint venture model, you create a company with a developer, and that shares the costs, returns, and risks. And not always the cost comes in financial case, can also come in the form of your land asset or site. And of course, you can self-fund as well and take all those on yourselves. So what considerations do you take when choosing your developer model? We see the benefits of community-owned energy enterprises in a couple of examples there we're working with, which is West Oxford Community Renewables and Avesco in Lewis district area. They retain the ownership and benefits in the community. It gives the community a stake in the project, which makes it more likely to go ahead and get acceptance from the local community. And it retains the project more likely for its lifetime. That enterprise is more likely to want to retain ownership of it for the whole life, not sell it off to another commercial party. But you may well not have one of these in your area yet, and that's also what we're working on, creating more of these kind of enterprises. So commercial developer, you've got more choice and more available, and they've got easier access to finance themselves, so they can raise their own money without you needing to do anything. But there are sharks in the markets. With any new market, there's always the need to get professional advice to negotiate fair terms and take all the risks into consideration. And one of those risks is that after the option stage, the developer sells on the site and the options to another developer, so you don't actually have control over what happens. So the work we've been doing in the last year or so, there's a guide called Funding Revolution, which we're hoping to launch in January with the Department for Energy and Climate Change and Bates, Wells and Braithwaite solicitors. This was giving models for local authorities and community enterprises on how to run and establish revolving funds which continue to invest into carbon-saving projects, of course, including renewable energy. So one of those models is to lend money out to households, community organisations and small businesses. You can use the feed-in tariffs and heat incentives to repay those directly because they're assignable. You can get the money straight from the energy supplier rather than having the household or business pay you. So that makes it more secure. You can rent through and give electricity for free. You've seen these models just now. And you can also use your credit risk to borrow money and lend it on to a community enterprise or community fund, which wouldn't be able to borrow at such cheap rates. And if you say borrow at 5% and lend at 7%, you can also make a return out of doing that. And also, we're looking at ways which local authorities can share capacity with a community enterprise, and whether that's your capacity to support and publicise or your officers' skill sets as well. That work's been carried out in a project called the Climate Finance Initiative, which is working with South East Development Agency and those two community enterprises, Low Carbon West Oxford and Avesco, as well as Eastleigh Borough Council, which is looking at a local carbon compensation fund called Carbon Free, and with West Sussex County Council, where we're looking at financing models for low carbon building refurbs, which includes renewables in the school setting, the own estates, fire stations, libraries, etc., and also ways of building that in with behaviour change programmes, so you get the best of both in terms of changing behaviour, educating children as well in schools about climate change and energy savings. So what we see as future trends, so greater community ownership of projects, that the skills and capacity at the community level will increase, and for project financing as well, but there is a gap there at the moment, that partnerships between community enterprises and local authorities will take off, and that will be backed up by local regional revolving funds which are community owned and not for profit, as well as public and private financing at a much larger scale. The Green Investment Bank was only £1 billion, but that's still quite a considerable amount more than was available, is currently available, and that should lever in a considerable amount of bank lending as well. I would imagine 10 to 20 billion on top of that, so a considerable amount more. So just to recap, been through feed-in tariffs and renewable heat incentives, the costs and returns of different projects, what hurdle rates are and how important they are to consider, what causes risk and uncertainties, public sector suitability for projects, where you can get capital from, sharing those risks and benefits, and working with the wider community and the future trends. That's just information about our publications and projects. Another project there is Refit West, which is looking at private sector housing retrofits in the Bristol City region. And the publication in the middle is called Smarter Finance, which will be updated this year, but it covers the best opportunity for carbon savings in the public sector.